Welcome to the Princess Power Hour, where we show you how to go from pauper to powerful by transforming your health, your wealth, and your relationships. Here's the princess of podcasting herself, Natalie Thomas.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to have a great show. We are going to be talking about, are you suffering from personal development fatigue? We were going to call it where you're coming from, but I think are you suffering from personal development fatigue is going to give us a lot more context. And some of you can go, yes, I am. I've been there. Help me. So here we go. I am going to tell you about my lip color of the day because that's a tradition around here. I was hoping to show you my puppy, but he has wandered off. I have the cutest new Pomeranian puppy. But my lip color of the day is Sheer Berry Diamond, one of my favorite colors, although I probably have half a dozen favorites out of the 50 or so in the line, which is amazing. Now, David Gilks, did I say that right, David?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, just going to check everybody. I don't want to disrespect our guests here. And David, one of the favorite things about this lipstick, check this out, okay? It is kiss-proof. It is smudge-proof, okay? And I can put this stuff on in the morning, and it lasts me 9 hours. Now, it's guaranteed a minimum of 4. It can last up to 18 hours. But my gosh, that is a time saver. It's a money saver, and I love it. So you can grab that over at www.lipstickkissesandlove.com. And while you're there, you want to pick out a color and pick out a gloss. The gloss is the secret sauce that locks it all in. You're going to put on 3 very light coats of the lip color after you've shaken it up. And I just shook my computer there. I hope you all didn't just, get your head banged around while I shook the computer. But anyway, then you put a light coat of the gloss on and you are good to go. You might want to re-gloss, but here's the great thing besides being smudge-proof and kiss-proof and all that other stuff. It is lead-free, wax-free, GMO-free, vegan, and not tested on animals. So, switching gears to our guest, David, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. This is going to be fun.
Awesome. And David is in Canada, and he's amazing. Let me tell you about him. David is the owner and developer of Factor 3 Fitness. He's a medical exercise specialist, a medical exercise program director, a certified yoga instructor, and a nationally ranked natural competitive bodybuilder. He's been rated as one of Canada's top personal trainers and has trained thousands of clients in his 25 years in the health and wellness field. David's work as a medical exercise program director is through Core Essentials Training, an online fitness and mental training platform offered through Factor 3 Fitness and the I Am Project. He's been a strength and conditioning coach for the past 11 years, as well as a longtime student of yoga, Olympic weightlifting, and martial arts. Before he was coaching fitness, he was a chartered herbalist and bio-kinesiologist through his family clinic in Canada. So that is awesome. Can I throw in something else here okay, David got up to get something, his coffee, something like that. He's got a rockin' body. So, wow. You did good for somebody being 25 years at this. I'm the other end of the spectrum. I just joined a gym. I've joined gyms before.
Right.
But I finally got that mental change that I wasn't doing it for weight loss. I was doing it for my health.
Right.
And it was actually one of my guests that convinced me and made that switch in my brain. And I was actually having fun today. Now, I won't ever be, amazing physically, but it feels good to be there and be doing the right thing for my body and balancing my hormones.
Yeah, weight loss is always a side effect. It's never a goal.
Well, one of the things that happened to me every time I would join a gym before is I either wouldn't lose weight or I would gain. And people would say, it's okay, you're building muscle. And I think, I'm not here to build muscle. I'm here to lose weight, And so, it didn't work because my goal wasn't right.
Right. Well, actually, our conversation today, I think will really play into that because that's where I started this whole line of thinking many, many years ago. That exact thing, that we have more fitness solutions than any other time in history. Like there's more options for people to succeed, and yet just the opposite is happening on a kind of global scale. And that's what kind of drove the conversation years ago. Why do people know better but can't seem to do better?
Ooh, that's a good one. Why do people know better but can't seem to do better? Yikes, that's powerful. That makes me think of somebody that I knew who had a lot of food allergies, but she had no self-control to not eat those things that made her ill. And it happened to be somebody in my life, and it made the family miserable, because, you know, she'd go into migraines and all these other dramas that lasted like 3 days, but she knew better, but she couldn't do better. Wow. Are we going to be talking about that? Are we going to drill down on that?
Yeah. I mean, it's really where my whole career is actually heading. I'm streamlining more and more into that process, because it's, in any walk of life, whether it's finances, whether it's career, whether it's, relationships, inside all those conversations in those aspects of our life, there's only I believe there's only ever any experience of unhappiness when we're stuck in the contrast between knowing better and doing better. Otherwise, we wouldn't know any different. So there'd be no reason to be upset if we didn't actually have a reference point other than where we currently are, that we believe we should be there. Right?
Well, tell me more.
Well, it's we think about it. It's like this whole conversation started when I got involved in orthopedic rehabilitation. And a mentor of mine, Dr. Michael Jones, he was a professor at Berkeley University, and he said to me, he said, if anything is weird going on inside the body, he said it's probably neurological, right? It's probably something to do with the nervous system, something to do with the brain. Says because we deal mainly with the mechanics of humans, right? In our practice originally, he said it's, if a muscle's not working, a joint's not functioning, the body can't move properly, there's a lot of issues with balance. Let's go check out the neurology. Let's go check out the brain and see how the brain's communicating. And what was quite fascinating is that the more I got into the conversation around it, the more I started studying it, I realized that an injury to the body was only partially held at the site of the injury, was stored in the brain maps that were actually a part of the original control mechanism for movement. So if you had whiplash, let's say 10 years ago, and you went through physio, and you went through massage therapy, and you took some anti-inflammatories, and all the site-specific things have been dealt with, right? The soft tissue's fine, there's no inflammation, but for some reason you still can't turn your head to the left. And a lot of people, and so insurance companies were cutting people off, but people truly still had dysfunction. They still had loss of function, and nobody really addressed it. That in my area, nobody was addressing it. And we realized that though the injury was dealt with here, the neural map, the map around the motor cortex that was involved in rotation of the head, was actually injured, and it had the apprehension. Because when you get hammered hard from behind, so where whiplash generally occurs, you get a guarded reflex, right? All these receptors and around the muscles, they lock down, they feel this impact come to the body. So they go into this guarded reflex. But nobody ever told them the injury, that the accident stopped. The accident is over. Nobody ever bothered to go inside the mind and rewire the map of the injury. And so when I started doing that, in like 2 or 3 sessions, what I'd start doing is I'd go through and say, well, if I ask you to turn your head, all you can do is access your history. That's all you can do, because that's all you currently have. So, and this is kind of a philosophical thing about being in the present, right? Being in the now. So we now have to create a new map. So I would get them we'd spend a week or 2 developing some core strength. We get their core muscles firing, the buttock muscles firing, their pelvic floor engaged. We'd work on posture. And once we had the set of new reference points, and it wasn't just a matter of people doing the exercise, it was a matter of people thinking, imagining, feeling, and then doing, always in that order. Think, imagine, feel, then do. As we went through that order, then once we started doing that, and again, we had, let's say, a couple thousand repetitions in place, then we'd say, okay, I want you to turn on your core muscles, turn on your stabilizers, now turn your head to the left. And they'd turn their head with no problem whatsoever.
Wow.
Yeah, brand new map, brand new association to movement. And so I continue to practice with clients with total hip replacements, total knee replacements, because they're actually blind at the site of the joint. There's nothing left. All the information the messaging from the joint is gone, right? They carve it out and put those new prosthetics in, right?
Okay.
So now the joint can't talk to the brain.
Really?
So there's a big gap in that space, a big gap in the hip, there's a big gap in the knee, there's a big gap when occasionally people get shoulder replacements. So again, we had to go inside the mind, and we actually almost had to create a new reference point. How do you transfer information across a blind chasm inside the body? So this whole experimental process, we became very creative with it. We realized the mind is beautifully creative. It's so amazing if you can, but what it needs and what the brain loves is patterns. The brain loves a pattern, which is basically what it looks for continuously. That's how we develop. That's how we make decisions, good or bad. But we look for the patterns in our environment. We look for the patterns in our feelings. We look for the patterns and how things react to our efforts. And then we make decisions based on those patterns, of course, right? So that's nothing new. But what was really fascinating is that, again, when they go to the higher level of the brain and you said, well, can I actually change change the patterns I want the brain to perceive? And so the more we got into that, then we realized that, well, we had such an amazing control over the human body. What about our psychology? And so the exploration got into, well, how does the brain store our history? And that actually led into the world of neurolinguistic programming. Mm-hmm. That was created actually in Berkeley University back in the 60s, John Grinder, Richard Bandler. And so we started going, well, if I can do that to a physical injury, what can I do to an emotional injury? Could the process be similar? So
you actually do all of that in your practice?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, well, and it's because Einstein said something beautiful. He said, if you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it well enough.
Right? I like that.
And so I asked myself, would the universal mind or the creator or God or whoever, would he make it that complicated to have a life? Would he make it that complicated to become philosophically aligned? Would he make it that complicated to get physically healthy? Mm-hmm. And I thought about it, I said, maybe not. Let's assume on our behalf. Mm-hmm. Let's assume that the creative mind actually made it really simple. We just choose to make it complicated because it gives us validation for a reason for not getting up and moving forward in our life. Right? If you say life's really complicated, it means, well, perhaps, but the likelihood is that if I use that, it just gives me a reason not to go forward. It gives me a reason not to as the expression is, pick up my cot and walk.
Yeah.
Right? I don't have to do anything.
We like to have excuses in life, don't we?
Yeah, and especially I think, as we get older, we just get tired of listening to our own stories and listen to ourselves beat our own drum of our past, and it becomes very frustrating inside your own head. And I can imagine, and that's being completely self-aware of your own silliness. And the more you become aware of your own stuff, then you look outward and you realize, oh my God, it's just everywhere. It's the dominant conversation of the planet, which explains really the condition of why we are where we are in this day and age. Awakened, but still not motivated enough to make the big steps necessary to make this thing change around.
I see that. I look at patterns in people's lives, and I love to help people, and I do this show to help people. But I have a little personal thing that I hold dear to me, is that I won't pour myself into an empty bucket, or a bucket that has a hole in it. Yes. Okay, it can be empty. I can work to help someone, but if it's got a hole, if they're not pursuing doing their own work, right, it's a waste of my time and energy.
Yeah.
And I've made that mistake enough to say, enough, thank you,
Yeah, it's very taxing, right? It's, I think the term is out there, it's called psychic vampires.
Yes, right? Yes.
Yeah, I heard that years ago. And going,
yes.
What a relevant term for people that just don't want to move forward. It's, I said a couple of weeks ago, I wrote in a post, the universe is walking around looking for people to greet. But if you're sitting on the ground, whining about your, the sorry state of affairs of your life, mm-hmm. and you're unwilling to actually stand up, the universe steps mm-hmm. over you on its way to greet somebody else. Right?
Yes. I have a person that I know very well that it comes from a very victimized position. And I care about this person, I love this person, I try to explain, you are attracting more attacks from perpetrators by staying in this victim place. You have to break the power of that in your life. That's become an excuse for you, but it's attracting more abuse, and you don't want that. Right. And he's just not at a point where he's able to receive it now. And it's again, I have to sort of take my hands off. It's painful to watch. And I've learned from my own mistakes. I've been there. I've done that, in so many ways.
Well, I was in, I think 25 years ago, I was in the south of Portugal in a place called Praia da Luz. And by all accounts, from the outside, it seemed like the perfect life. Living in close to the Mediterranean. Portugal is just on this side of Gibraltar. But I woke up one day, and this was probably towards the end of my 15-year bender through life. And but I woke up and I realized that there's going to be a point in time, probably in the not too distant future, that I'm just going to drop dead. My lifestyle is just so out of control that it's just going to take me out. But if it did, nobody would know and nobody would care.
Wow. And
talk about a hollow feeling, right? It just when you realize that. And then I remember seeing a quote that said, if your presence doesn't make a difference, your absence won't be noticed.
Oh, wow.
And I go, oh, and that actually spoke really, really well to me. That's and actually it's a scary feeling. And that's when I decided to move back to Canada, and I got involved in my family's clinic, and I did started my internship in natural health care. But it's just that I think unless you come to that point, there has to be that whatever it takes for the individual. That unless you come to that awareness and that hollow feeling in your stomach, where you're really not sure if tomorrow's even going to come. Something's got to shake you out of that stupor. And as you said, there's nothing that we can do on the outside to leverage people out of that position until they're absolutely ready to go. And sometimes, I've come to the conclusion that, I don't think everybody's going to make it. I don't, honestly, you can't save the world, but you can actually help the people that are already in motion. But they just need to be protected.
Yes. I like to think of it as start with one. If I can help one person, and then I know it multiplies because that person is going to help another person. And, that's my heart. Now I know, and this is switching gears a little bit, and we're going to come back to this. Are you suffering from personal development fatigue? Right. We're going to talk about the I Am Project. So we're covering a lot, folks. So this has less to do with exercise than it has to do with your mindset. Okay. So David, tell us about your trip to Nigeria with your son and what you were doing over there.
Well, it's I wanted my son because I had the chance to travel quite a bit through my younger years, and so I wanted him to experience the world as it really is for 75% of the population. And actually, we were in Central America. It was in Nigeria. It was in Nicaragua.
I'm sorry.
That's right.
It started with an N, guys. Okay, no, I'm kidding. I don't mean to disrespect that. I blew it. I'm sorry.
No, not at all. No, it's but it's actually, and Nigeria would have been interesting, but it would have been a longer trip.
I'm sure that Nicaragua was very interesting.
Well, we're in a place called Iquilio, which is just below the El Salvador border, and so we're in the jungle. There's really very few homes there. They're mainly just makeshift shelters. A lot of corrugated steel and wood, and there was a guy from actually Canada that actually opened up a place called Monty's Surf Lodge, and it was out in this little spot out on the Pacific Ocean, and so we went there. We taught English, went to schools and taught English there, but I took my son to school because regardless of the hard work that we do trying to tell our kids how good of a life they have, they hear it, but they have no context for it.
Yes.
Like an iPhone doesn't grow on trees. I should get an $800 phone. So being in an environment where there's the average working wage is $2 a day. We were there from September to December, and of course we were there when all the storms are going through Florida. I think 3 hurricanes across the whole line. Now we didn't get the winds, but we got the rain.
Okay.
So we didn't get the devastating winds coming through, but it was pretty wild. A lot of flooding out there, and lots of homes were lost. And but it's just the resiliency of the people, and the fact that the most telltale thing, and you'll hear this almost every single time for people who travel, what was startling was the amount of laughter you could hear in a country that where people have little or nothing.
Really?
And the amount of smiling, the amount of giggling and laughter. The kitchen staff at the compound we were at they were just laughing their head off at something all the time.
Really?
And communicating, because people weren't trapped on their cell phones. So they actually had a lot of interaction. And it's, and of course they had this great philosophy is that if you don't work, you don't eat. And so everybody had something going on, which I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm a huge fan of that mentality, right? The bus, you can take a bus into town. We call it the chicken bus because it's loaded up with everything, right? And every time the bus stops, you get a bunch of women or individuals coming on, and they're selling water and fruit and plastic chairs, but everybody's got a thing going on, and hugely impressed by that. So the exposure for my son to that space, he's 15 years old. So, he got a little bit of it, and it has tempered him. But, over time, I think it's that reference point I wanted to create. So, a couple of years down the road, he starts remembering as his maturity grows, the experience will actually be a lot more impactful for him, I think.
I think that's a beautiful thing that you took that time. I mean, that's a big investment from September to December. That's income that I assume you weren't making, or then again, you could have been doing online coaching and things like that. I would guess we talk a lot on this show about nomadic entrepreneurship. So did you just set it aside, or did you take it with you?
I took it with me, but there was still a big cost. I mean,
yes, of course.
It was you're paying food and lodgings for 3 months. So
yes.
It wasn't cheap, but I think but it was an important investment, because it's, as I tell my son, I don't care if he goes to university. I'm not interested in him having to achieve that, whatever is considered notable. So if you're in Bali with some cool tattoos on a surfboard building homes, if you're happy and you're contributing, it's kind of my bottom line. If you're contributing and you're happy, I don't care what price point your life looks like.
I love that. And this goes along so much with my philosophy. I have, I parented 19 children. 17 of them were foster children. I had 2 natural children, and I adopted two children. And I wanted very much to teach my children about giving back. And that's, why I started being in the foster care process, and wanted to show about being an active part of the community and finding some way to give something, and it can be different for different people. But I just moved away from an area, it was Orange County, California, that the kids have a very strong sense of entitlement. And I just keep trying to go back to contribution, when you're in a family. And one of those things that I say is you don't work, you don't eat. And unfortunately, adopted children in particular have a very strong abandonment and rejection issue that they usually have to work their way through. And you can love somebody. One of my kids was born addicted to cocaine and alcohol. And I told him, don't ever try it. Your body's pre-programmed for it, for addiction. And he didn't listen. So he's got some issues there. And I have to use the tough love route with him. 24 years old, never had a driver's license, not working productively. Well, you carry them like that. It's not helping them, and it's hard to step back, but it's for their benefit.
There was, that was a big part of my experience. I left home around when I was 13, off and on. And
did you really?
So I lived a very, very unique life. Of course, but I mean, nobody gets through this life scot-free, right? If you have a birth certificate, somebody's come into your life and messed with it. It's just a part of being on the planet. So, but I read something that was actually really, really powerful for me, and it was a quote by Carolyn Miss, and from Sacred Contracts. And a coach of mine that I worked with, she had recommended Carolyn Miss. She said it's a very prolific author, incredible spiritual author, kind of like one of those spiritual grandmothers that you're afraid of. Right? Like she's going to come punch you in the throat if you say something silly. you try to be a victim, she's going to beat you up. So it's the beautiful grandmother kind of fear. But she said, if you look at your life and say, listen, where you are in life, you asked, said, what are your characteristics? What's strong about you? What's powerful about you? Well, what is valuable about who you are now? And can you list, 3 to 5 character strengths or values? And, and so I think, well, like a perseverance, I got huge perseverance. I've got, I believe, a good amount of courage, huge empathy, right? Almost dangerously empathetic, because I can sense what people feel, and it's a bit of an empathic kind of connection, which can be volatile. I'm insanely curious, and I have a very expansive mind. So, so with those aspects, well, the only way, so before you were born, you and the Creator got together, and he said, okay, listen, before I send you down there, tell me, how am I going to program you? What is it that you want to show up with? When you go through life, what character strengths do you want? I've got your physical form, right? You decided to be a guy. I got your physical form here. But how do you want to show up in the world? And I said, well, I wanted all these. He said, okay, well, but there's a price to pay. The only way I could be courageous is to be put in a space where courage was necessary. The only way I could be remotely empathetic to the people I work with is to have walked in their shoes. The only way I could be insanely curious and fascinated is by having a mind that was forced wide open to look for possibilities where none seemed to exist.
Wow.
Right. So none of the obstacles were there because I was being punished necessarily. They're there because I was being refined for the work that I'm doing now.
I love that. That is absolutely beautiful. That's a fabulous perspective. Well, tell us more about, if we are suffering from personal development fatigue, what do we do to make a shift there?
Well, it's part of the challenge is getting back to the one of the topics we were talking about, like, where are you coming from? So if we look at anytime we buy a book or take a course, we're looking to move forward from our current position because we think that we're in some sort of lack, right? We think that we could be better.
I can't believe how well you just nailed that. Right. Wow.
So
yeah, that's powerful.
So is it, so people, again, so if you look at, well, if I can use you as an example, right? So, okay. So you're on a journey, and the journey is about reclaiming your health, reclaiming your getting into a good pattern of behavior, and just feeling better, feeling stronger, and hopefully a good side effect is that you'll get control over a few pounds here or there. Mm-hmm. But the problem is that when we think about doing anything, so when you think, or the average person out there thinks about going to the gym. So in order to do that, you have to access your historical reference point of what that meant. There's nothing new going on in our minds unless you actually develop a brand new reference point, like the whiplash piece, right? Mm-hmm. If I don't develop a new reference point for turning my head, I'll never turn my head. If I don't develop a new reference point for going to the gym, all I can ever do is access how I've always thought about it, because that's the only thing existing inside of my mind. So, even the words I'm speaking to you, the only reason you know these words is that your brain is decoding them based on your historical connection with this conversation or with English in general. Mm-hmm. Like everything is a reference point. We're always referencing.
Right, putting it through our paradigm or our grid and our understanding. And we can only, we don't know what we don't know. I think that's a powerful.
Yeah. So the challenge is, and imagine this, and this is the whole I am project conversation, is that between where I am and where I wish to be, which we believe is forward, there's a series of obstacles. Now, people keep thinking about the obstacles, and because we don't know how we think, so we're assuming the obstacles are current and somehow in front of us. But I find most of the obstacles, I would say close to 90% of all obstacles, are simply our historic remuneration. We're simply thinking about our history. So between where we are and where we wish to be, there's a series of obstacles, and they're part of our historical referencing. So when I talked to, I had a lady that was working with here, a client of mine. I've known her probably for 20 years. And she was, very frustrated. She came in and she's on 4 different medications for depression and anxiety, taking beta blockers because of an issue she's dealing with, taking blood pressure medication, 2 years in therapy. And the therapist finally said at the end of it, said, I can't break you. I just can't break you. $200 an hour. I said, I can't break you.
Wow.
So we spent 40 minutes in conversation. And I said, so, you had this goal. You obviously want to be healthy. Nobody wants to die. I mean,
right.
It's a wish.
Most people don't. Yeah.
No, generally not. It's not the first thing we think about. But so when we said, well, so what are the obstacles? And I said, think about the obstacles. If you think about where you are and where you wish to be, how many obstacles? I didn't ask what they were. I asked how many. Because when I asked how many, I wasn't getting a story from it. I was getting a number. And I said, she goes, I think there's probably about 4 or 5. I said, the first obstacle goes back how far? Because again, the obstacles are based in history. It's the way we step into our history to gain a reference on how we should be responding today.
Okay.
And so the reference point that she went back to was her at the age of 13. And she's probably, in her mid to late 50s.
Okay.
Right. So when she thinks about trying to get fit, she's referencing partially a 13-year-old girl who is bullied that has a self-image issue. So what does it feel like inside the adult, in the body of an adult, the mind of an adult, when the emotional context of a 13-year-old child shows up inside your body? And I think Brene Brown said this once, that when that emotional kick comes in, it hijacks the prefrontal cortex of your brain. And you become 13 years old for all intents and purposes in that moment until that emotional flood backs off, until that actually subsides and you kind of shake it off, as it were, and you step into being an adult in the present moment. But and I think, it's just everybody thinks that the world thinks that we lack self-control and that we lack intelligence, and maybe I was just born this way. And I go, no, I think you're just running out of bad maps. You got a lousy GPS and you don't know where you're coming from. And if you're struggling going forward, it's because you're driving in the rearview mirror. And we need to go back and collapse these identities. So the 13-year-old girl, for example, doesn't know that this woman is a woman. Right? So it's almost like, I think you could appreciate this. What would it be like to go back to a 13-year-old child who is completely cut off, that's dealing with a horrible self-image issue? You as an adult, what could you offer them in your current context? So I would have her go back and what could she offer as an adult to a 13-year-old child who is struggling with this self-image issue, struggling with this idea of being bullied and ridiculed. And said, so sometimes our current intelligence is living in a different map in our brain, and it's not effectively connecting to the places in history where it will do the most good. There's no point. Yeah, there's no point in knowing better in the current context when our history isn't aware.
Well, I'm going to tell a weird story here, and it's going to seem a little bit off, and it's not to embarrass anybody. It's not to criticize anybody. It's just to help for context for the show, hopefully. I was married for 10 years to a man who told me before we got married, we didn't have sex before we got married, that he had a small penis. Right. And I sincerely wasn't worried about it. I just figured, that you can satisfy each other. There's plenty of ways to do that. Right. And as I got to know him better and as our marriage progressed, I just kept getting the impression that this man was stuck at 12 years old. That was just the belief that I had. And lo and behold, it turned out that the first time he had sex was when he was 12 years old, and it was with a 21-year-old. He was in a group home, and, it was an inappropriate relationship, obviously. And I think he'd learned a lot of sex from porn and things like that. But I think also he had been made fun of in the gym. He had been made fun of in the Marines. And the truth was, it was small when it was flaccid. It wasn't really small once it was working condition. But but his brain was where the problem was. Right. And that's the point of my story. It really doesn't have anything to do with penises. It has to do with how our brain can get damaged and hurt and stuck. Right. And you're saying that you can help people shift. Now, is this psychology that you're doing with them?
No, it's actually just looking. It's neurology. It's, how do we looking at how does the brain store information, right? And so when you think about any event in your past, you're either going to pull it forward as something that you see. So you see a visual image of the occurrence in your past. It may include something you hear, so maybe a conversation or a sound, whether it's sound of a car running, or the water at a beach, or the sound of the wind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there may be a feeling associated, a kinesthetic component to it. So generally, in the context of how we walk people through memories, is that we look at, I don't want to know what happened.
Okay.
Like, I'm not interested in the story, because
Okay.
when you get into the story, I lose the individual I'm talking to.
Okay.
Because now you become 12. I don't want to
Okay.
talk to a 12-year-old. I want to talk to the adult. So I never ask what's going on. In fact, I never really know the truth. I never know the real details of the story, because because I'm not interested in the story. I'm interested in, how did you store the information? Was it predominantly visual? Is it kinesthetic? Is it auditory? How do you store the information? So I'm not allowing them to step into it and lather themselves up with misery. Because people can do that. They don't need my help to do that. We do that naturally. And plus, I also keep them outside of it. So we have I use a board, 20 by 20 board called the I am board. It's an intuition board. And so when we do it, we're actually third person perspective. We're outside of our minds, staring at this board with a bunch of tokens, with the various words like career and wellness and what have you. And so we move the tokens around on the board, but as people are looking at it, they're looking at it outside of themselves, which is hugely important, right? So they're disassociated, they're observing it. We discussed a point in time in history, so we look for a number, not an event. We're looking for how many stories are between you and your goal, right? How many occurrences in life are you referencing? And then through each one, so for this lady, when we were talking about when she was 13, it's many years ago, I said, well, is it visual, auditory, or kinesthetic? Now, the very first thing she did is she wanted to tell me the story. And I quickly stopped her and I said, I don't know. I don't need the story. I don't need you becoming 13 here, because I don't want to talk to a 13-year-old. I want the adult to show up and take over. So I had to keep pulling people out of their stories, because it's so natural to slide into it, right? So all we did is that we went through a process of actually altering. So if you have a visual image, and when she remembered it, it was very close. It said, so if the visual image, is it close to you or far away? And if something's impacting you emotionally, generally people will say the image is very close to me. In my mind's eye, it's just right in front of me. So we created some distance. So we'll push the image further away. Push it further away until the feeling in your body becomes less oppressive. All right. Again, not asking about the story, just saying this is more the mechanics of how the brain stored it. And so we spent about 45 minutes playing around with the position of the image, the color of it, the shape. And the more we altered that, we altered the way the brain stored the original idea, which means once we did that effectively, and if there's an expression, neurons that fire together, wire together. Right?
Okay.
So this is how you create a habit, right? So the neurons in your brain, if they fire together, they create a little bundle, and that becomes like a pocket of a memory. So we went into that little pocket of memory, and we changed the way the neurons are associating. We changed the idea around the image. And so we diffused it enough. By the time she went back into it, it was almost irrelevant.
Wow.
She looked at it, well, how's it feel? Well, actually, it's like a long time ago. Is it still color? No, it's black and white and muted, right? So you actually have that ability to go and alter. Now, I'm not saying...
I want to ask you a quick question. How's your health? Do you or anyone that you know have health issues like type 2 diabetes, osteoarthritis, high cholesterol, or high blood pressure? Did you know that drinking Chanson alkaline ionized water from a Chanson water ionizer is like health insurance from your tap? While it affects everybody's bodies differently, it helps some people's bodies balance itself so well that some doctors have been able to reduce or remove their patients from medications. My favorite quote is from Dr. William Kelly of the College of Metabolic Medicine, author of The Cancer Cure. He says alkaline ionized water produced by a water ionizer has become the most important advancement in healthcare since Alexander Fleming's discovery of penicillin. So I invite you to visit chanceandwater.com, say that you heard about water ionizers on Princess Power, and ask if that $200 discount is still available.
Counseling is not important. I think counseling is hugely important. But sometimes it's just until we can get rid of the oppressive emotions that are surrounding some of the events, we can never talk about it. We just can't use the words. And as a male, and I'm sure this is true for many women as well, but how many things have we experienced that we will just never give voice to, ever? I don't care how good the therapist is, those words are not coming out of my mouth.
Interesting.
Right. So what do you do with those stories?
As women, we do talk about it more, but I'm sure there are some things that, are kept.
Well, but even when you speak, you still have to filter it. You still go through this whole process of the reality and hear as you conceive it to be, and then you filter it out based on your audience or based on your environment. Nothing ever gets out completely raw. It's not like a raw image, exactly the way you thinking it. It has to be filtered out. It's just what we do. So I decided, if we never actually had to use words, could we always tell the truth?
Okay, now that one you've got to expand on. You just went over my head. Say it one more time.
If we never had to actually, let's say it this way: if we never actually had to verbalize our truth, never actually had to speak the words about our history, would we always tell the truth?
Wow. Okay, tell me the answer, because I'm sitting here baffled.
So if you have a process in front of you, and if I'm asking you things like, again, can I experiment with you really quickly?
Sure.
Like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So think about somebody in the last 3 or 4 years. When you think about them, regardless of how much work you've done on yourself, no matter how evolved we become, we still get irritated by people, right? Okay. All right. So pick somebody in the last 3 to 5 years that every time you think about them, you still kind of go, they still give you a little knot in your stomach. No, you should be, okay. Yeah, that wasn't very hard, was it, right? That was very quick.
Nope.
All right, so when you think about this person, roughly how long ago in history was this person and that whole occurrence showed up? When did that happen?
About 5 years.
All right. So when
the ending of that.
Yeah. Okay, so when you reference that memory, when you reference that idea, how did it show up inside your mind? Did you see was it an image of what was going on? Was there a conversation with any auditory? Was it simply a feeling? How did you remember?
It was just more of a feeling. I've done a lot of work on it to forgive the person and just kind of let go. But, I know that was the person that, caused the pain.
All right. So when you think about it, so if there's only, so this is more of a mechanical conversation. So if it's predominantly kinesthetic, right? So basically a feeling, right? So the feeling, where's that feeling show up inside your body?
My stomach.
All right. So kinesthetic is the primary way that memory is stored, or the way you remember it, right? So
for me,
yeah.
All the time, you mean?
Well, just right now, when you're referencing that event. So kinesthetic was a dominant characteristic of how you remember.
Okay.
Not what you remember, but how you remember.
Okay. Yes.
So we're not interested in the story because that's kind of irrelevant because it's 5 years ago.
Okay.
We're only interested in making you feel better.
There wasn't one story. It's like bunches. So
I know.
This is good.
I know,
this is good.
But your first reference point is to that. Now here's the fascinating part. So is there a visual piece to it at all? Like anything you can see? Okay. Is it when you see the visual part? Is it a still image or is it moving like a moving picture?
It's still.
Okay. Is it a color, black and white?
It's in color.
Okay. And is it close to you or far away? Where is it in your perspective?
Medium.
What happens if you drew it closer to you? So it's kind of about 5 inches.
I would feel repelled.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so it's now the fact that it's not even happening, it still actually has control over your emotional state to some degree, which I find fascinating, right? Because all we're doing is messing around, basically, like I'm in a sound studio messing around with all the buttons and kind of freaking people out, right? What if we pushed it out to the horizon? push it back. Think about it, if it was 5 years, how far in the horizon would 5 years be? How far would you have to push it out to make it, to push it where it belongs, in a reference of 5 years of space between you and it?
I would rather push it like 5 million years, like to a teeny dot that's out in outer space would be like really cool.
Okay. Well, but you can do that actually.
Okay. Done.
Well, yeah. So actually go inside your mind for a second. Now it's just, if the next space shuttle is taking off and you have this picture that you're going to put in a little Ziploc baggie and you're going to hand it off to the attendants, and they're going, all the luggage you're putting in there, the plants they're going to do experiments on, and the food and the extra fuel, whatever they're loading in, and they take your little baggie of this picture.
Okay.
So you're going to put it in, and of course you have to get away. So you're on the other side of the fence, and you hear the 3, 2, 1, and you see the jets kick off, and you hear that massive roar of these engines, and you see this thing climbing away. And you kind of feel like there's a string attached to you and it, and there's still that visceral connection, but the string's only so strong. It's pretty loosely connected to you, but there's still a bit of a piece there. But that ship is powerful, moving very, very quick. And it gets to a certain point in the horizon, just as it starts to hit the end of the Earth's atmosphere, and the string breaks. All right. And now you let the ship disappear from your vantage point. It disappears, and that string is gone. You know, it's trailing off, and you just have this loose string laying on the ground in front of you.
Okay.
Right. All right. So take a deep breath and just let that whole idea settle, that it's in the stratosphere. It's way beyond your access at any point in time now and in the future.
I like that.
Now, here's the interesting thing. So after that deep breath, go back and access the memory that you first brought forward exactly the same way that you had first talked about it.
Okay. For my listeners,
Right.
all right, I really did this. I wasn't just playing along. And I don't feel that same pull. Now, I got out my scissors and I cut the string before it broke with the taking off, because I didn't want to fly with the thing there. But, yeah, that was cool.
Okay, but can you access it? Can I
access it? I can see a picture of the person in my mind. Yeah. It's just kind of like,
Yeah. So there's nothing here in your stomach.
No.
Yeah. And that's the whole point. So.
No. And that is really cool.
Are we just trying to feel better? We want to feel better about our past.
But are we going beyond feeling better? Are we breaking power over stuff in our body?
Yeah, well, because remember, I mean, if we just look at the mechanical level of thought, and this is, you can transcend into the spiritual piece, but I like to keep it very simple. We can't go back if we're not accessing it, if not giving our brain a reference point that is uncomfortable, a reference point that is potentially dangerous, potentially not say life-shortening, but anything that would sort of thwart our ability to move forward. We want to go back and, as you said, kind of cut the strings to it. We want to go back and modify the experience. We want our current intelligence that we've done through all the books that we've read, all the courses that we've taken. There's little use in all that information, I believe, unless we can actually take it back into our history and just drive it through our past.
Wow.
Because 5 years ago you didn't know, and yet here we are, myself included. Here we are, 5 years past or 20 years past, doing all this work, and still not really feeling as good as we should for all the work that we've done.
That's true.
Right?
That is true. I can see my growth. I can see my growth. I can see the change, and I'm proud of the changes, but there seems like there's always room for more, for sure.
So what about the possibility of the fact that all this information here, we're not using it to go forward. We're using it to go backwards instead of actually trying to build a life forward. And I had this idea a couple of days ago, which I think I thought it was profound, and I'll leave it up to you to decide, is that my vision boards and my goals for my future, I'm in meditation, I'm taking it back to my past.
Your vision boards too.
Yeah, I'm taking everything, because if I could get the 4-year-old, and if I could get the 13-year-old, and if I could get the 19-year-old, and I get the 28-year-old, if I could get them all on board, so every time I thought about going forward, my brain has to reference my history. Does it not?
Okay.
right?
I'm trying to get up with you here.
All right. So if I'm, because when we think about going to the gym, we reference a history that is flawed about success in getting fit, right? We reference making money. We if we had issues of bankruptcy and financial struggle, we reference the fear and the mindset around scarcity, right? So those contexts of failure and insecurity, they still exist very powerfully. And rather than saying that, well, it's just a thing that I have to get over and I have to be vigilant and strong, good, maybe we don't have to fight that hard. Maybe we just need to go back and tell them that our life is rocking, but nobody let them know. Nobody let the 10-year-old in you know that your life is just extraordinary. Does the 9-year-old in your life know that you are this incredible parent to all these kids? Like, do they see that? And can we let our past know that our future is amazing? So if we reference backwards, is it possible to seed our history with the events of our current life and the viewpoint of going forward? So if I look backwards, I'm going to create a time loop so that the 8-year-old and the 13-year-old and the 21-year-old and the 28-year-old has the information about this extraordinary life that we have currently. So knowing that my brain always goes backwards first to access my history for reference of how I should respond and move forward.
Yes.
What if we seed it with our current reality?
So this is like time travel within yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, now this is interesting because I know you talked about keeping spirituality out of it, but the Bible says that the kingdom of God is within you.
Absolutely.
And I think that people think of religious stuff versus a relationship, and I'm not going to get into all that and preach, but we're talking about time travel within yourself.
Absolutely.
That's interesting to me.
But I mean, the Bible's been talking about it. Philosophers all through history. I mean, it's been a big conversation for a long time.
Well, I've been around a long time and I haven't heard that. You're waking me up to something new here. I'm into this.
No, wait, but you heard it biblically speaking, though, right?
Well, yes, but not. I didn't put it together in this context. Now, I'm gonna switch conversation for just a second, and I don't really want to wrap up. I don't know if you have a little bit more time and we could keep going. This is really good. I mean, sometimes people have commitments, and I do have a commitment in a little bit, but wow. I have a couple of friends right now with breast cancer, and they have both had mastectomies. Actually, I can think of 3 people just in the last few months, and 2 of them within the last 2 months. Actually, last month. Well, I opened up some blood work, and I've had 4 different tests for different things recently, and I got my blood work results on Thursday, and they were positive for not good things that we're talking about.
Right.
But my daughter said something interesting to me. She said, "Mom, you don't have to fight cancer." And I thought, really? And my husband's a professional jockey, so he has an amazing mindset. And I remember saying to him one day, my back is screaming at me. Now, this man deals with a lot of pain in his body on a regular basis. He's had, broken ribs, broken back, all kinds of things, many, many injuries, actually died at one point, and came back to life from getting his throat hit into a rail 60 miles an hour.
Oh my God.
I mean, it was just a miracle. His neck wasn't broken in that one. Thank you, God. But when I said my back was screaming at me, he said, "Why are you listening to it?"
Right.
And I thought, really? I don't have to listen to it? Are you kidding me? And that's just one of those things that seed got planted, and I've just chewed on it and chewed on it. Now, men are better at compartmentalizing than women.
Right.
Okay. I happen to be pretty darn good at it. And I think that's one of the things that helps me in business a lot as a businesswoman. But, you sort of detach from the emotion side of it. Women tend to be more emotional and make our decisions that way. But I guess what I'm trying to say is we can make choices. And I feel like what you're saying is beyond that. And I'm trying to really pull out and grab onto everything you're saying. Is like, I'm just kind of like, I choose not to participate in this. This is, and there's a fine line with denial. You have to look at, okay, we got to be real here.
Right.
But I think we can go, I'm going to make healthy choices, and I'm going to, eat better, and I'm going to do this, but I'm not going to get into the drama that's expected by the medical field.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I think the missing part that I probably should have alluded to, and I talked about this very briefly when I was talking about working with people with whiplash, and I said we spent time developing their core strength. So if you started each day, and I remember my grandmother used to get up and she'd read the King James Bible. Now, I had no idea how she read it because it was like this big, little tiny print.
Yeah, but, okay, I know what you're talking about. Yep.
It was a little book. And but
I'm not a fan of the King James. For those of you that are listening, I love reading the Bible. It's very important, but these and nows are totally unnecessary. You can get an updated version. You can read it in modern English. It means more to you.
Yeah. Okay. So, but she read it every morning, and I guess I must have been probably 6 or 7. But I asked her, like, why do you read this? Like, why do you read this every morning? And she says, well, just it tells me how I'm going to show up in my day. It gives me a guidepost. And so when I started working through this process, spending time in older countries, quite a few years, I found a flow inside these countries. And what I believe the challenge that we have in North America, which is really why we have this personal development fatigue, is that we don't know what we stand for. We haven't actually taken the time to unearth. So if you look at your core strength, right? What are your core values? And when part of the I Am project is that before we start working on people's stuff, their history, we actually have to delineate their core strength. Who are you currently? And how do you know? If you say that I'm empathetic, I'm generous, I'm courageous, then we need to go let's find proof of that. Let's go into your history. You can find proof of how useless of a human being you are any given day. That's easy to find.
Okay.
So, but the awesome stuff isn't so easy to find. So if we pick out 3 to 5 core values you think are really important in running your whole life, then let's go find them. And so as we go through that process, okay, similar to looking at the more challenging part of our history, if I'm courageous, when was I courageous? I want you to remember it. And I want you to remember not only, when it was in history, but how did it feel? What was going on? And we want to really embrace the experience of being courageous so it becomes visceral. And so we can access that memory really quickly. So what if you started your day remembering how courageous, how empathetic, how your perseverance, whatever values, and that was the context in which you started the day. You embodied it, you remembered, right? Full recall. But all your decision-making processes will be from that vantage point. So okay. if I look at so on the I Am board, if you can imagine an I Am token in the middle, this is, of course, is determining this is your core values in the middle. And all around are all these other aspects of your life, your career, your finances, your spirituality, your wellness, your relationships, right? Each one of these actually has to be developed off the same core. Okay. The same core values needs to be the vantage point in which I look at my entire life. So no matter where I look at my life, I have that same vantage point. I often tell people, and one day I'll get in trouble for saying this, but I said, listen, be a Catholic or be a Jew, but pick a philosophy.
Okay.
Right. So when I look at things like any strong culture, any strong faith that people have, beyond, if we had the ability to meet beyond our personal biases, and we both agreed, so let's say in the form of Christianity, for example, for easy context, beyond your own insecurities and frailties of human, inside of a relationship, if you both agree on the philosophy on the other side of you can meet, and you both agree to that, then you can work through pretty much anything. Because it's not about human petty behavior. It's not about grievances. If you have a higher philosophy that you both agree to, and it's been well articulated at the very beginning of the relationship, no matter what's going on, the challenges are, you both realize that, we're just being stupid humans. We need to go to something much bigger than us and agree to meet there and look backwards to our life, and we can agree on the context of how to move forward. Because we have the strong philosophy that we both agree to.
That makes very good sense.
Okay, we don't have that in North American culture, not really. Because we don't have a culture. We have a geographical similarity. We all live in this one country, all live in that country. But being in older countries is completely different. When I was in Nicaragua, I spent time the last couple of weeks in a place called Leon, one of the colonial cities. And I'd spend an hour at a time sitting in these old, beautiful Catholic churches. I'd watch people sit there and kneel at the altar, and they'd pray forever. And people would be sobbing, or they just, I'd see men there struggling with things and going, what an incredible gift they have that most of us don't have. They actually believe somebody's on their side, somebody's looking out for them. They have somebody to talk to and just get everything off their chest, all their fears, and said, it's not my religion. It's not my religious path, but I go, how beautiful. The certainty of that would be extraordinary. And they can run their life, and that's what gives them strength, the ability to tap into these pieces and incredible belief. So in North America, I think we're trying so hard to believe in ourselves, and we're supposed to, be this independent, strong-minded, entrepreneurial boss babe, guy that's crushing it, and it's not how it works, because we become so independent, we're completely cut off from everything that makes life work, and we're part of this beautiful ecosystem that should be self-supportive, should be collaborative.
Oh, that's interesting.
And we've almost seemed to cut ourselves off from the very thing that actually gives us power, right? Which is everything else around us.
I think that's so interesting, but I want to go back to something you said earlier. We're talking about the core values that you see in yourself, or core strengths that you see in yourself.
Right.
And I was thinking, you're talking about perseverance. I was thinking about tenacity. But if we tie ourselves to that, it goes back to something you said even earlier than that. Are we constantly inviting that experience of things to overcome and be tenacious about by choosing that, or is that something we can rewire?
Yeah, well, I think we, it's like taking perfume from a flower, right? We don't need the whole plant in my house. I just need the essence of it, right? And so when you think about being courageous, it's the positive aspect of courage, not the misery we went through.
Okay.
Right? So we're not dragging ourselves back to the mat over and over again just to re-experience it, because it's the positive context. But just think about this: you raised all these kids, you created this career. It is inconceivable that you cannot succeed at fitness and wellness. You're just using you're accessing the wrong part of your psychology, because you have success in spades. But the problem is that you can model yourself. You have to model, somebody else out there in the world. You have everything you need, as they say. We have everything you need inside of us. But are you accessing your own intelligence, or you're accessing your frailty? And if we access the parts of us that we are a bit insecure about in our history, well, of course, we can only repeat our history.
Yes.
But you have everything you need. But only if you had access to it. So the easiest barometer to look at is that, listen, if I'm feeling insecure and uncomfortable and maybe depressed, I'm not here currently. I'm simply reveling in a historical reference. I'm living in my past. I'm digging deep into my history. If I'm feeling insecure, bad self-image day, frustrated, anytime that's coming on, I am simply accessing my history. So that tells you exactly where I'm living currently. If I'm kind of freaking out, I'm very worried, I'm paranoid, I'm frightened, I'm fantasizing about something that hasn't even happened.
Yes.
The only time I feel good is now, because I can live in my current intelligence. I can live in my current strength. Right?
So fear is false evidence appearing real.
Right.
And, my grandmother says that she's the worrier of the family, and, she takes pride in that and that kind of thing. And I'm like, well, why would you take pride in something that the Bible calls sin? God tells you 365 times not to worry. So why would you do it? Why would you put that effort into that? And that's not to say that I never worry, because I don't want to lie. I worry sometimes, but I try to just give everything over to God is my method, Right. But let's say somebody wants to work with you and they want to be a client to work on this I Am project. What does that look like?
Well, it's right now we're in the last aspects. So I had the rest of this month here. We're shooting another 8 videos for the IamProject.com. We have an old website that's currently live, but we're migrating everything over to a new online course. And so when people sign up for the course, what they get, of course, they get access to a whole series of videos. So the course is about 8 weeks in total. They get the I Am board and the tokens, which gets mailed out to them at the time when they sign up. And then, of course, we have I've got a series of counselors that have joined the program. We have clinical psychotherapists. We have social workers using the I Am project. Then a counseling group here in Vancouver has actually come on board and they're going to help out with people that need a little bit more work than perhaps what I can provide, or have the time or even the skill set. I know my limitations, right? I'm the mechanic here, right?
Good for you.
But it's and I do work with individuals from time to time online, just through this kind of forum, through a Zoom call. But it's it's this piece where we have to presuppose that we're not broken, that nobody's broken.
Really?
Right? You
can do that?
Because if we don't, we're always apologizing for being less than. And just what a frustrating way to go through life, the feeling that you're always playing catch up and you always have to apologize for something, or even the success you have is marred with guilt and insecurity. Like there's got to be a point in time where we can just live in grace and live in the life that we have without feeling like that we're always always being judged for something by ourselves or by somebody else.
No, before the feeling guilty part, not that I don't ever feel guilty, you just described me. I've always felt like in life that I was playing catch up, and that everybody else had the manual on life except for me. Everybody else knew how to do school except for me. And I wasn't parented by my parents. Right. The people who parented me didn't have time for me. So right. I had to learn by watching other people. So I always felt a few steps behind. So very interesting.
Yeah. And I think the challenge is that it's, what I'm trying to create, what I've created here and trying to create for people is really just an anchor point. I'm not telling how people to go forward. I'm not telling which path they should take. I just want to anchor them so they can actually clean up a bit of their history, recognize it for what it is, history. All right. It's just a historical reference point. Get people perhaps to think a little bit deeper about who they are in the context of when I'm developing my life, I'm setting goals and aspirations going forward. I want to make sure that as I move towards a goal, I'm not moving away from something valuable. Right?
Well, that's important.
Right? Because if you move towards a financial goal, is it possible to move away from your health?
Yes, absolutely it is. And that's a lot of why I do my show. We focus on health, wealth, and relationships. And with wealth, it's mostly business. And it's because when people are doing business, they're usually neglecting their health or their relationships. So I'm trying to bring balance by, bringing people like yourself on to teach about all this.
Well, I'll offer you one more thing because I don't want to take up too much of your time here, but we could talk for hours, I'm sure. But how about if we exchange the word balance for the word harmony?
Ooh, okay.
Because in my mind, balance is actually divisive.
Really?
No, well, it's just, so I've got a 15-year-old son. I've got a 22-year-old daughter. I've got a 10-year-old daughter. So if I was trying to balance my life,
would I have make it equal, and then you got to feel guilty?
Yeah, I can't. I don't have the ability to balance my life. But if I could show up in the philosophical context that was harmonious. So if I had an hour to spend with my child and that was all I had, but I could live there not in guilt, but I could live there the full expression of my core beliefs, and the hour of connection would be phenomenal. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't that be so much more beautiful? And the decision I made around spending time with him and then looking at my health, I go forward with my health and I embrace that without it actually adversely affecting my relationship. I can create my business and build my business greater, but also having an absolute 360-degree view on how that actually affects my wellness. And so that each goal that I create is always done in reference to the whole, not in a compartmentalized way of being, which is kind of what we do. And then, especially when you're building a family, you have a career, you have finances, you're off-field here, that's your thing. And your family is somewhere in the middle that you see occasionally at the expense of our relationships, of our wellness, of our spirituality, of our ability to contribute. We expend all the things that mean the most to us in the pursuit of wealth, right? And this piece up here, because we compartmentalize it. But what if we broke down all the barriers in our mind and said, when you make a decision, you need to look at your whole life. And so I Am Project, because you can see it, you can see your whole life. And as you build each piece, you have to rethink the possibilities of going forward so that each piece actually supports each other. Right?
So in 8 weeks, a person can go through the entire program.
Absolutely.
Wow. Well, tell us more. I know you said iam.com and it's going to be available shortly. I think you had something for our listeners if they reached out to you. Is that correct?
So it's just,
tell them about that.
Yeah. So it's so online, I set up a Zoom call like this where I actually walk people through the experience. So because it's a big conversation, and so I'm doing one on May 15th, and I'll do one actually the week after. So that would be, pop my calendar up here. So we got May 15th. The first one. So if I look at even on May 22nd for your listeners, actually I'll set up another IM project, a link, and I'll send you the link right after the show here.
Thank you.
And really, I just want to walk people through the process so they actually start to understand. And what I've developed it's out there already. I actually just pulled it together in a kind of unique way that just made sense to me. I had to find a way, my own way through this. But it's based in neuro-linguistic programming, right? NLP, which has been around for quite a while.
Tony Robbins is huge in that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he made it famous for sure. That was my first introduction to it through him. Mm-hmm. But I think it's just what I want to get people to the point of having personal absolution.
Explain that.
Well, so the fact that I don't want to build a life based on my supposed crimes. I don't want to build a life apologizing for my supposed failures. I want to look at this incredible experience in life, and I want to be like the coral reef, right? The side of the coral reef facing the ocean just gets hammered on by storms or by tide changes, and yet it's the most vibrant part of the coral reef. Part of the coral reef facing the shoreline is mottled and gray and not much life. There's no challenges. So all these things that we think that we're experiencing, which are adversities, it's just life. It's life it's life with the fishes, right? It's just what nature is doing for us, not to us, but for us. And if I can help people get to that context where so in this, on the 22nd, they'll have the experience of learning how to access the power that resides within, which is Tony Robbins' conversation.
Yes.
So that we can move forward without having to apologize for our existence day to day, right? Feeling like we have to apologize for being less than, for not being the perfect body shape, not having the right kind of money, not having the right kind of edge.
I was probably in my 40s before I learned to stop apologizing for everything. And I would apologize to you for things that had nothing to do with me as well. You were having a bad day, I'd apologize.
Yeah. So it's so I think once you understand that process and you start to understand the mechanics of it, it's not personal, it's simply neurological.
It's not personal. It's simply not neurological.
It's simply neurological.
We're going to end on that, David. But if you're open to it, I'd love to have you back so you can expand on all of this more. Absolutely. Would you be willing to do that? Absolutely.
Well, what we should do is set up a time, and I'd gladly give you a little bit of time off the air, and then I'll actually walk you through this process. If health and wellness is a goal for you, then let's actually walk you through it, so you get a first-hand experience of what it's like, and we can. I can take you back and forth through the whole trek of time, so you get a real powerful understanding. And because if that's your goal going forward, and because of all the work that you do, I think it's we always get connected for a reason with other people out there in the world. And so part of my you're helping me with my message, which I hugely appreciate. And so my gift to you is actually this journey of yours in health and wellness. I want to show you that you have everything you need already inside of you. As you know, we just got to clean up some of the debris of your history.
Well, bless you. I received that gift. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, everybody, thank you so much for listening. We have really enjoyed having you to listen for the show today. I've really enjoyed David, and you can tell we've gone into some new territory for me here. I'm going to explore that more, and hopefully he'll be willing to come back and expand more, and you can reach out and become a part of the I Am Project and get the healing that's available to you. Thank you so much. Please share the show, like the show, comment. All those things help us in the search engine ranking, and we really appreciate it. Bye-bye. See you next time.
Thanks so much for listening to the Princess Power Hour with Natalie Thomas. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit princesspower.com or on Instagram, Pinterest, Facebook, and Twitter at @PPPrincessPower. Until next time, work smarter, not harder. Have a question for your host of Princess Power Hour, Natalie Thomas? Contact us at www.princesspower.com or tweet us at @PPPrincessPower.